In the complicated and rather realm of the criminal justice system, a chilling countdown is underway as we brace for the impending release of some of the most fearsome and scariest female inmates. As the days tick away to their release, the world is left to wonder what lies ahead for these terrifying individuals. Join us as we explore the stories of these scariest female inmates who are about to regain their freedom and the crimes that brought them to prison. Leslie Van Houten. The story of Leslie Van Houten's crimes is a harrowing tale that unfolded against the backdrop of one of the most turbulent eras in American history. Born on August 23, 1949, in the serene Los Angeles suburb of Altadena, her early years seemed to promise a conventional middle-class upbringing. She was raised in a church-going household alongside an older brother and two adopted Korean siblings. Her parents, Paul Van Houten and Jane, had diverse ancestral backgrounds, including Dutch, Irish, English, Scottish, and German heritage. However, the semblance of familial stability which Leslie had crumbled when her parents divorced when she was just 14 years old. This fracture in her family marked a turning point in Leslie's life. It seemed to trigger a rebellious streak in the young teenager. At the age of 15, she started experimenting with marijuana, and shortly after, at 17, she fled her family home with her boyfriend. It was a clear indication that she desperately yearned for independence and had a desire to escape the confines of a conventional middle-class upbringing. Despite her initial departure, she eventually returned home to complete her high school education at Monrovia High School in 1967. It was during this period that a shocking revelation came to light. According to her own account, Leslie Van Houten was coerced by her mother into undergoing an abortion and burying the fetus in their backyard. This traumatic event severed the bond between mother and daughter, leaving Leslie harboring intense resentment towards her mother. Her path took a turn towards unconventional pursuits after completing high school. She dabbled in yoga, a practice that was gaining popularity among the counterculture, and embarked on a year-long secretarial course. But the allure of the counterculture movement, with its embrace of free love, anti-establishment sentiments, and rejection of societal norms, soon drew her in. She became a hippie, residing in a commune and seeking to live a life that stood in stark contrast to the values of her middle-class upbringing. However, fate would soon intervene, leading her down an even darker and more twisted path. After her time in a Northern California commune, Van Houten crossed paths with Catherine Scher and Bobby Beausoleil. Together, they formed an unstable quartet, but after a while, jealousy and personal conflicts set in, which ultimately led to their dissolution. Scher, motivated by curiosity and perhaps the search for something more meaningful, departed to join an infamous group, the Charles Manson family. In 1968, at the age of 19, Leslie Van Houten followed suit and became a part of the Manson family. It was at Manson's Spahn Ranch that their lives became enmeshed in a surreal reality, one dominated by the charismatic and domineering influence of Charles Manson. A charismatic figure with a sordid criminal past, Charles Manson presented himself as a messianic figure. He wove a narrative of impending racial warfare, which he termed Helter Skelter, inspired by a Beatles song. This vision would serve as the catalyst for a series of unspeakable acts. Manson was a master manipulator, using a potent mix of drugs, sex, and mind control to bend his followers to his will. Most of the cult's members were young, impressionable women who had been drawn to Manson's magnetic charisma. They surrendered their identities and autonomy, becoming mere tools in the service of their leader's twisted vision. Under Manson's rule, the lives of those in the family were meticulously controlled. From their daily routines to even their intimate relations, everything was subject to Manson's will. His hold over his followers was strengthened through a bizarre blend of pseudo-spiritual beliefs and pop culture references. His prophetic warnings about a coming race war and his strange interpretations of the Bible created a sense of urgency and fear among his devotees. He convinced them that he alone held the key to their salvation. He also introduced them to LSD, a powerful hallucinogenic drug that blurred the lines between psychedelic reverie and mundane reality. Van Houten, like the others, soon became entranced in this alternate state of consciousness, making it easier for Manson to manipulate them and bend them to his will. The Manson family's most infamous act occurred on the nights of August 8th and August 9th, 1969, when Manson directed a small group of his followers to commit a series of brutal murders. Their targets were selected not for personal enmity, but as symbols of the establishment. Actress Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, and 4 others at her residence were savagely murdered in a spree of violence. The following night, the LaBianca couple met a similarly gruesome end. Accompanied by Tex Watson, Patricia Krenwinkel, Linda Kasabian, Susan Atkins, Clem Grogan, and Manson himself, they descended upon the LaBianca residence. Manson entered the home with Watson, leaving the others outside. Van Houten and another companion subdued Rosemary LaBianca, while Watson attacked Leno LaBianca. Van Houten then took a knife and with chilling brutality, inflicted multiple stab wounds on Rosemary. The details of these killings were horrifying, with the victims bound, tortured, and stabbed repeatedly, and words like "pig" scrawled in blood at the crime scenes. Manson intended these horrific acts to trigger the race war he believed was imminent, during which he and his followers would supposedly emerge as the rulers of a new world. However, Manson himself never provided a clear explanation for his actions on trial, leaving the entire world to theorize what led to the senseless violence that unfolded that fateful night. The motive for sparking a racial civil war was a theory posited by prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi as a possible motive. The subsequent trial of Charles Manson and his followers was a spectacle of manipulation and control, much like the cult itself. Manson, who was accused of orchestrating the heinous acts, refused to allow his female co-defendants to present a defense that might implicate him. However, Van Houten's demeanor in court was marked by an eerie indifference, and she even giggled at the mention of her victims, leaving the public and legal community horrified and bewildered, wondering what would have set the young woman on that path. She readily admitted to her involvement in the murders she was accused of, but staunchly denied Manson's participation. In fact, she was much more eager to admit her involvement in the murders than acknowledge that she was influenced by Manson to commit those heinous acts. She even went as far as replacing her defense lawyers one after the other, as they tried to emphasize Manson's control over her actions. She interjected during expert testimony about LSD's impact on judgment, asserting that her actions were influenced more by the Vietnam War and television than by Manson. A peculiar episode unfolded during the trial when Manson etched an X on his forehead, a bizarre symbol of his sway over the group. Van Houten and the other women followed suit, mimicking this eerie gesture, another sign of their complete submission to Manson's influence and control. However, as the trial progressed, they gradually distanced themselves from this mimicry, perhaps recognizing the unsettling implications of their allegiance. But unfortunately for Van Houten, the damage had already been done. On March 29, 1971, Van Houten, along with her co-defendants, was found guilty of murder. During the sentencing phase, she tried to absolve Manson by revealing to a psychiatrist her violent side, leading to unflattering descriptions of herself as a spoiled little princess and a psychologically loaded gun. She went as far as to claim that she was involved in a killing, which she actually wasn't. The extent to which she went to prove that Manson had no sway over her thoughts or actions was as shocking as it was terrifying. Leslie Van Houten was sentenced to death, making her the youngest woman on California's death row at the time. In fact, after she was sentenced, she was held in a special unit because there was no female unit for death row inmates in California. However, the day of execution never came, as the state of California temporarily suspended the death penalty, and subsequent legal rulings commuted her sentence to life imprisonment. However, Van Houten's legal battles were far from over. She faced retrials and parole hearings over the years, marking her journey toward potential release. Each of these hearings was marred by legal complexities, public outrage, and the constant scrutiny of her actions and statements. In the face of relentless legal setbacks and public disdain, Leslie Van Houten began to distance herself from Charles Manson and the cult that had once consumed her. Over the years, she began to express remorse for her heinous acts and her role within the Manson family. Her transformation was chronicled in books and films, shedding light on the complexities of her case and the question of whether a person who had committed such heinous acts could truly rehabilitate and change. The tides finally shifted in 2023. After decades of appeals and parole hearings, Leslie Van Houten was granted parole. On July 11, 2023, Leslie Van Houten emerged from prison, leaving behind a legacy of horror and redemption. But of course, the question of whether she would ever be fully reintegrated into society still stands. Gypsy Rose Blanchard. On June 14, 2015, in the heartland of Greene County, Missouri, sheriff's deputies discovered the lifeless body of Claudine D.D. Blanchard, a woman known for her devoted care to her daughter, Gypsy Rose. D.D. lay in a pool of blood, dead, the victim of a possible homicide, but her disabled daughter, Gypsy, was nowhere to be found. Once the authorities established that D.D. was beyond help, the search for her daughter ensued, and within minutes, everyone was on the lookout for the young girl. According to her now deceased mother, Gypsy suffered from a myriad of chronic conditions, including leukemia, asthma, and muscular dystrophy. She insisted that Gypsy's mental capacity was that of a 7-year-old, a consequence of premature birth. Vigilant neighbors and the authorities continued the search, suspecting foul play. At that time, it was believed that Gypsy Rose could have been abducted, leaving her wheelchair and medications behind. The ensuing investigation led police to Wisconsin, where Gypsy was found. Authorities discovered that she was, in fact, hale and hearty, staying with her then-boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn, whom she'd met online. The twist in events would happen when it was discovered that Gypsy was an adult and not a child, as her mother claimed. As the truth unraveled, it also emerged that some doctors had found no evidence of the claimed disorders. But in reality, Gypsy was perfectly capable of walking, didn't require a feeding tube, and was not battling cancer. Her shaven head was simply the result of her mother's choice to shave it. Experts strongly suspect that DD suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a condition also known as factitious disorder imposed on another. This led her to invent her daughter's illnesses, all in the pursuit of garnering attention and sympathy for being the caretaker of a supposedly sick child. They suspected DD suffered from Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a mental disorder where a caretaker fabricates illness in their charge for attention. The entire community was thrown aback at this latest information, and what began as a concern for a disabled girl evolved into sympathy for Gypsy Rose, imprisoned in a web of deception. As investigations went on, the depth of DD's deception began to surface. Her fixation on Gypsy's health began when the infant was merely 3 months old, claiming she suffered from sleep apnea. Her conviction only deepened as she attributed various disorders to her daughter. DD presented herself as a charming and dedicated mother, which led people to trust her without question. While medical tests often yielded uncertain or conflicting results regarding Gypsy's supposed illnesses, DD had a cunning strategy. She would immediately discontinue contact with any doctor who dared to doubt her daughter's condition. Moreover, she manipulated many caregivers into aligning with her fabricated narrative. DD possessed some nursing knowledge, enabling her to convincingly describe symptoms, and at times, she even administered medications to Gypsy to mimic certain ailments. Her charisma and unwavering devotion to her daughter further solidified the facade. As Gypsy grew older and began to communicate, DD instructed her to remain silent during medical appointments, ensuring that she remained the sole narrator of Gypsy's fictitious medical history. DD informed Gypsy's father, Rod Blanchard, that their daughter suffered from a chromosomal disorder, which she said was the root cause of her numerous health challenges. Rod commended DD for her unwavering dedication to Gypsy. However, when some of DD's relatives started noticing that Gypsy appeared to have no need for a wheelchair and raised questions, DD swiftly decided that they relocate, leaving their previous environment behind. Using Hurricane Katrina as a cover story, DD painted herself as a victim of the disaster. This allowed her and Gypsy to receive aid in relocating from Louisiana to Missouri in 2005. Once settled in Missouri, DD continued to take Gypsy to various medical appointments, further perpetuating the facade of her daughter's fabricated illnesses. Even as Gypsy entered her teenage years, DD continued to insist on her daughter's sickness, spinning more lies about her age. In 2008, they moved into a new home in Springfield, Missouri, courtesy of Habitat for Humanity. The house was adorned in pink and equipped with a wheelchair ramp. This move came with added perks, including charity-sponsored outings to concerts and even Disney World. Throughout, DD reveled in the attention she garnered for being a devoted caregiver. When Gypsy was 14, she visited a neurologist in Missouri who suspected she might be a victim of Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Unfortunately, this doctor didn't report the case to authorities, citing insufficient evidence. It wasn't until 2009 that an anonymous report raised concerns, stating that DD's accounts of Gypsy's illnesses had no medical basis. This led to 2 caseworkers visiting their home, but DD managed to convince them that everything was in order. As Gypsy grew older, DD took her deception to new heights, altering her daughter's birth certificate to make her appear younger. However, Gypsy was gradually slipping from DD's grasp. In 2011, Gypsy made a daring attempt to escape her mother's clutches by running away with a man she met at a science fiction convention. DD managed to track them down with the help of mutual acquaintances. She persuaded the man that Gypsy was a minor, although she was actually 19 at the time. According to Gypsy, upon their return home, DD destroyed her computer and physically restrained her in bed. Gypsy also revealed that her mother would sometimes resort to physical abuse and deny her food. Unfortunately, nobody, including the doctors or authorities, acted soon enough to prevent the tragedy that was about to occur. Eventually, Gypsy found her way back online. She ventured onto a Christian dating site, and there she encountered Nicholas Godejohn. The two became close, and she shared the truth about her mother's actions with him, eventually asking him to help free her from DD's grasp. In June 2015, Godejohn arrived at her home as agreed and attacked DD, stabbing her to death while Gypsy hid in the bathroom, her ears covered to shield herself from the horror. Together, Gypsy and Godejohn fled to his home in Wisconsin, but their escape was short-lived. They were soon apprehended by the authorities. In a somewhat unusual turn, Gypsy had posted twice on the Facebook account she once shared with her mother, including a stark statement that B is dead. Later, she clarified that she made the posts because she wanted her mother's body to be discovered. In the aftermath of Dee Dee's murder, those who knew Gypsy couldn't help but wonder why she had resorted to such a drastic measure. After all, she could walk, and she could have potentially exposed Dee Dee's lies by simply standing up in public on one of the numerous times she was confined to the wheelchair. However, as psychiatrists pointed out, Gypsy had been conditioned to believe that no one would believe her, and the painful reality was that Gypsy had spent her entire life under her mother's strict control and surveillance. Education was denied to her, and despite her normal intelligence, Dee Dee insisted on spreading the false notion that Gypsy had the mental capacity of a 7-year-old. And whenever the poor girl made attempts to leave, they were immediately fouled by her mother. Dr. Mark Feldman, a leading authority on Munchausen syndrome by proxy, aptly described Gypsy's life as one of total control, akin to that of a kidnapped victim. He emphasized that Gypsy was essentially a hostage, and the subsequent act that unfolded can be viewed as an attempt by a hostage to break free. The trials that followed exposed a tale of manipulation and abuse, as Gypsy's medical records painstakingly detailed the abuse she endured. Her lawyer was able to negotiate a plea deal for the charges. After a tumultuous trial, she was sentenced to 10 years for second-degree murder. Her boyfriend, Godejohn, received life imprisonment for first-degree murder. The story of Gypsy garnered widespread interest, leaving people eager to learn more about the harrowing events she endured. In 2019, a TV series featuring Joey King playing the role of Gypsy was released and was widely received. In an interview with Dr. Phil, she revealed her relief at being free from the situation, although she expressed sorrow over her mother's death. Gypsy openly shared that it wasn't until after her mother's demise that she fully grasped the extent of her deception. Despite knowing she could walk and eat normally, she believed her mother's false claim that she was battling leukemia. Gypsy is scheduled to leave prison on December 28, 2023. Kathleen Folbigg. Few cases in Australia have faced such intense public and media scrutiny as that of Kathleen Folbigg. In 2003, when she was convicted, a tidal wave of attention engulfed the case, branding her as Australia's most reviled female serial killer and, most especially, as the mother who killed her children. But Kathleen's troubles started a long time ago, from her childhood on, and those harrowing experiences have marked her path ever since. On a chilling January day in 1969, the life of Kathleen Folbigg was irrevocably altered. Her biological father, Thomas John Taffy Britton, committed a heinous act, brutally stabbing her mother, Kathleen May Donovan, 24 times. He was arrested the day after and, after trial, sentenced to 15 years in prison. At a mere 18 months old, Kathleen was left orphaned, a ward of the state, and thrust into a world marked by unspeakable trauma. She was placed under the care of a foster family, where she found some stability and the beginnings of a sense of belonging. It was during this time that Kathleen's path intersected with that of her foster sister, Leah Bone. Their bond would prove to be an enduring source of strength through the years, offering solace amid the chaos that defined their shared upbringing. As Kathleen grew older, she grappled with the weight of her troubled past. Leaving formal education behind at the tender age of 15, she embarked on a tumultuous journey that would ultimately lead her to Craig Gibson Folbigg. Their romance and subsequent union, though initially marked by promise and hope, gradually unraveled, culminating in a heartbreaking divorce in the year 2000. But the most haunting chapter in Kathleen's life unfolded with the arrival of her own children. 4 infants bearing the promise of new beginnings entered her world. Tragically, one after another, they were all taken from her, leaving a trail of heartache and inexplicable grief. Each loss was a devastating blow, shattering the fragile semblance of normalcy that Kathleen had fought so hard to maintain. Their first child, Caleb Gibson Folbigg, born on February 1, 1989, had a noticeable tendency to breathe loudly and was initially diagnosed by a pediatrician with a mild case of laryngomalacia, a condition it was believed he would naturally overcome this condition as he grew. He was otherwise a healthy newborn. Tragically, on February 20th, when he was just 19 days old, Caleb passed away in his sleep in a room adjoining his parents' bedroom. His parents discovered him that night, and the cause of his death was attributed to sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS, commonly known as cot death. After the death of Caleb, the parents were left in grief, but when she became pregnant with their second child, Patrick, trepidation mingled with excitement. Conventional wisdom suggests that these unfortunate events occurred only once, and the parents hoped that this time the child would stay. Patrick was born on June 3, 1990. One day, when he was around 4 months old, Kathy discovered him in the cot, not breathing. Her husband, Craig, administered CPR. An ambulance was summoned, and Patrick was revived. The incident, however, led to severe brain damage and ultimately a seizure disorder. 4 months later, at 8 months old, Patrick was put down for a nap. Kathy later found him unresponsive. Despite calling an ambulance, he couldn't be revived. The pathologist determined Patrick's passing was due to airway obstruction reaction triggered by epileptic fits stemming from an encephalopathic disorder. Kathleen's third child, Sarah, was born 18 months later. Sarah exuded a playful spirit, often sticking out her tongue for a laugh. In August 1993, at 10 months old, Kathy discovered Sarah lifeless in her crib. Despite summoning an ambulance, Sarah couldn't be resuscitated. Her death was attributed to sudden infant death syndrome. 3 years later, the Folbiggs welcomed their fourth child, Laura. She was the first among the Folbigg children to reach her first birthday. Laura was a bundle of joy, always up to her playful antics. For a while there, it seemed like the family had finally gotten their peace when she hit 12 months. But on March 1st, 1999, when Laura was about 19 months old, tragedy struck. Kathy moved her inside, left her asleep, and returned 20 minutes later to find her lifeless. Panic set in as Kathy frantically called for an ambulance. Laura had suffered from a cold-like ailment the week prior. After the autopsy, it was discovered that she had myocarditis, a condition often stemming from viral infections. Myocarditis denotes inflammation of the heart muscle. Dr. Kayla, the pathologist, determined the cause of death as undetermined. Laura was 18 to 20 months old when she passed, too old for sudden infant death syndrome to apply. Alan Calla meticulously examined Laura's little body, the fourth child in the family. He posited that he couldn't definitively rule out suffocation. In those days, the time between the 90s and early 2000s, there was a prevailing sentiment: 1 death is tragic, 2 suspicious, and 3 infant deaths should be viewed as homicide unless proven otherwise. Craig disclosed to the authorities that Kathleen had been increasingly stressed with the children. Then he mentioned, "My wife keeps a diary, and there are suspicious entries." From that instant on, the case transformed into a murder inquiry. Kathleen Folbigg was charged with her children's deaths. In 2003, her trial commenced, drawing immense media attention. Kathleen Megan Folbigg pleaded not guilty to murdering her children. The prosecution contended that she either intentionally killed them or sought to render them unconscious. The turning point and most pivotal moment in the prosecution was Craig, children's father, testifying against Kathleen. He stated that she had a short fuse with the children and struggled with motherhood. Medical experts presented conflicting opinions on whether natural causes played a role in the children's deaths. Then, there were the diaries. Kathleen Folbigg's diaries became a focal point, revealing her dark moods. Entries like, "She's a fairly good-natured baby. Thank goodness it has saved her from the fate of her siblings. I think she was warned. I feel like the worst mother on this earth, scared that she'll leave me now like Sarah did. I knew I was short-tempered and cruel sometimes to her, and she left with a bit of help. Was very suspicious to say the least." And the prosecutor repeated over and over that they were admissions of guilt. The jury bought the idea, and this ultimately led to her conviction based on circumstantial evidence. Kathleen Folbigg, who was found guilty of killing her 4 infant children, stood trembling as the verdict was pronounced. She still insisted on her innocence while being sentenced to a minimum of 25 years for 3 counts of murder and 1 of manslaughter. While her appeals were rejected, doubts began to surface about the evidence against her. In 2015, Folbigg's legal team petitioned for a review of the medical report of the infants' deaths. The doctor, Carola Vinuesa, conducting genetic testing on Kathleen Folbigg, discovered a specific mutation in a particular gene related to heart function. Both girls shared this rare gene mutation, which the 2 boys did not possess. This mutation was a very likely cause of their deaths. However, the judge the appeals were made to did not concur with Carola Vinuesa's assessment of the new genetic evidence. He also rejected Kathleen Folbigg's explanation for her diary entries as the entries of a grieving, innocent mother. Yet the legal battle persisted, drawing significant public attention and prompting questions about Kathleen's true culpability. Many began to wonder if an innocent woman had been unjustly incarcerated solely on the basis of circumstantial evidence. With this increasing buzz, a lot of evidence was brought on board, and genetic evidence found in the case challenged the prevailing narrative. Researchers meticulously examined the DNA of Kathleen and her children, unearthing profound revelations. They discovered genetic mutations that predisposed them to sudden cardiac death, fundamentally reshaping the understanding of the tragic events that had unfolded. These revelations suggested that underlying genetic factors played a pivotal role in the deaths, casting doubt on the original conclusions drawn. At this fresh inquiry, which was headed by retired Judge Tom Bathurst, prosecutors accepted that the latest research on gene mutations had changed their understanding of the children's deaths. On Monday, New South Wales Attorney General Michael Daly announced that, after all these findings, Mr. Bathurst had concluded that there was reasonable doubt that Ms. Folbigg was guilty. That statement turned out to be all that was needed for a lot of people to begin to clamor for the release of Kathleen, who at this time had spent 20 years in jail. As a result, the New South Wales governor signed a full pardon and ordered Ms. Folbigg's immediate release from prison. Kathleen Folbigg has been free since June 5, 2023. It's been a long time coming, and a sense of vindication permeates the air. 4 little ones lost, lost, a husband and wife torn apart, a woman unjustly incarcerated for 2 decades, and a family forever scarred. It is hoped that Kathy can finally reclaim her place in the world, be free from the shackles of suspicion and incarceration, and get fully reintegrated into society again. Yolanda Saldivar. Yolanda Saldivar was born on September 19, 1960, in San Antonio, Texas, USA. She grew up in a working-class Hispanic family in a neighborhood with a predominantly Mexican-American population. Not much is known about her growing up, but we know that she worked as a trained nurse at some point. She grew up with a passion for country music in her life, and she knew it would take a dramatic turn when she became involved with the rising Tejano music sensation, Selena Quintanilla Perez. After attending one of Selena's concerts, she was struck by the desire to create a fan club in San Antonio, so she began to contact Selena's father, Abraham Quintanilla, about her desire to start a fan club for the singer. At first, Abraham was hesitant about this arrangement, but Yolanda would not give up that easily and was persistent until he eventually granted her request, making her the club's president. The role of club president granted Yolanda direct access to Selena's personal life, career, and finances. In just under 4 years, the fan club grew from its initial 1,500 members to an impressive 5,000, becoming one of the largest fan clubs in the San Antonio area by 1993. Over time, Saldivar grew increasingly influential in Selena's professional affairs, assuming responsibilities beyond fan club management. Saldivar's dedication to Selena didn't stop there. She was later promoted to manage Selena's clothing boutiques, known as Selena Etc. However, the story took a dark turn in early 1995 as Saldivar's role expanded, as did concerns within Selena's inner circle. There were allegations of financial irregularities and embezzlement. It was discovered that Saldivar had been diverting funds from the fan club and Selena's boutiques for personal use. This raised alarm bells, and Selena's family began to scrutinize Saldivar's activities more closely. Selena's family uncovered Saldivar's embezzlement of funds from both the fan club and boutiques, leading to her dismissal in the first week of March. On the fateful morning of March 31st, Selena agreed to meet Saldivar at a Days Inn motel in Corpus Christi to retrieve financial records she had been withholding. Knowing that the game was up, Saldivar tried as much as possible to stall the handover by claiming a rape incident in Mexico. The singer decided to accompany her to a local hospital where they were redirected for the examination since the assault happened in a different place. When they returned to the motel, Selena insisted on seeing the records. It was at this point that Saldivar produced a .38 Taurus Model 85 revolver from her purse, pointing it at the singer. In a desperate attempt to escape, Selena was shot in the back, severing an artery. Critically injured, she ran towards the lobby seeking help, with Saldivar in pursuit, hurling insults. Selena eventually collapsed, and the motel clerk called 911. Tragically, Selena succumbed to her injuries in the hospital at 1:05 p.m. Following the shooting, Saldivar holed up in the motel room for nearly 10 hours, engaging in a standoff with law enforcement. Eventually, she surrendered to the police. Saldivar was subsequently charged with first-degree murder. Selena's untimely death was a profound loss to the music world. She was an icon in the Latinx community and beyond, known for her powerful voice and pioneering role in Tejano music. So Yolanda's trial, which took place in October 1995, garnered extensive media coverage. The trial itself was not televised, though cameras were allowed on the courthouse premises. It was relocated to Houston, Texas, as Saldivar's legal team successfully argued that a fair trial could not be ensured in Selena's hometown. Prior to the trial's commencement, CNN reported that the prosecutors of the case intended to present a contentious police confession signed by Saldivar. In it, she admitted to shooting Selena during an argument over accusations from the singer's father that Saldivar stole money from Selena's accounts. The defense, on the other hand, planned to offer testimony from Texas Ranger Robert Garza, who claimed to have overheard Saldivar asserting that the shooting was accidental. She allegedly objected when the police omitted this from her statement. The defense counsel maintained that the shooting had been accidental, but the prosecution countered by highlighting that Saldivar, a trained nurse, did not call 911 or attempt to aid Selena after the incident. The altercation with the law enforcement authorities before her arrest also did not make matters any better for Yolanda. After less than 3 hours of deliberation on October 23, 1995, the jurors returned a verdict of guilty for Saldivar's charge of murder. Just 3 days later, on October 26th, she received a sentence of life imprisonment with the possibility of parole in 30 years, which was the maximum term allowable under Texas law at that time. At 62 years old, Saldivar has been incarcerated in a Texas prison since 1995. She becomes eligible for parole in 2025, and a family member has indicated that she believes it's time for her release. According to this family member, Saldivar has undergone significant personal growth during her nearly 30-year confinement. They report that she expresses genuine remorse for Selena's tragic death and hopes to reconnect with her family and friends if granted parole. The family member shared that Saldivar has faced threats from fellow inmates and is living in constant fear for her safety. She has been isolated from the general prison population, devoting much of her time to reading the Bible and prayer. According to the family member, her faith has become a cornerstone of her life, and she firmly believes she has received forgiveness from God. Despite all these sentiments, not everyone is prepared to forgive Saldivar or advocate for her release into society. Selena's fans and family have made it clear that they vehemently oppose Saldivar's parole. Selena's father, Abraham Quintanilla Jr., has expressed his desire for Saldivar to remain incarcerated for the duration of her life. He firmly believes that Saldivar intentionally took Selena's life and dismisses her claim that it was an accidental discharge. But Yolanda's story had not changed, as she maintains that she shot Selena while attempting to take her own life, asserting it was an unintended outcome. Quintanilla remains resolute in his stance, regarding Saldivar as untruthful and steadfastly opposing her release. The tragic narrative of Selena's untimely passing has been the focus of numerous books, documentaries, movies, and TV productions. The latest edition is Netflix's Selena the series, which chronicles Saldivar's trajectory from an ardent fan to a trusted employee, ultimately evolving into a disgruntled embezzler who betrayed Selena. Saldivar's parole hearing is set for 2025, but it's no sure guarantee that she will get it. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles will take a good look at her case, checking out things like how she's been behaving in prison, her past run-ins with the law, her mental evaluations, and, importantly, what her crime did to the victim's family and society in general. So, whether she gets parole or not depends on the outcome of these findings. And with that, we come to the end of our video. If you liked this video and want more like this, check out the videos displayed on your screen. Remember to subscribe to keep in the loop.